Welcome to the Mile High Hoops podcast, where the NBA world has shifted dramatically since the last time I talked to you. And about 9 different, A to B to C level Nuggets news stories have come out since Thursday's Mile High Hoops podcast. We're talking all those things right now, starting with the number one item in the NBA. And you may feel you've heard enough about it, but we're still learning more as both Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic had their introductory press conferences today, earlier on Tuesday, with their new teams. Luka on the Lakers, Davis on the Mavs, in an absolute blockbuster, shocking move. I, like you, thought Shams got hacked. I did not believe it. I did not understand why a 25-year-old, 5-time first-team All-NBAer was on the trade market, let alone why you would target Anthony Davis as the guy you would want as the main part of the return. Now, there is a reasonable argument to be made of why you'd want a player instead of picks, particularly from a team that is likely going to be competing well for the next 10 years because of, all of the things that come with having Luka Doncic on your team. But what I would tell you is I don't think Anthony Davis is enough. I personally would have targeted a player a little bit younger, maybe a Jaren Jackson. But it is absolutely crazy to think that you're building your organization around Kyrie Irving, who can opt out after this season, Anthony Davis, and Klay Thompson in 2025. Though there is a case to be made that the Mavs actually got better this season, especially with their size. I like the way they match up. They didn't have Luka for most of this season. They've been playing how they've been playing, which has been okay. But this is a guy who took you to 2 Western Conference Finals and an NBA Finals in his young parts of his career before he's even hit his prime. He was the consensus frontrunner for the MVP coming into this season. Obviously hasn't been able to follow that up because of the injuries, which the Mavs are blaming because of his size. What I would tell you back is, imagine if he did get into shape if you have so many problems with his shape. So just a stunner. And, obviously Nuggets fans the first thought was, oh my God, we missed our chance. We never thought Luka Doncic would become available, and we missed our chance to pair him with Nikola Jokic. There's part of that, right? There's certainly part of that. Right now, given what we know is this trade was decided to be made within this year or so. The Nuggets couldn't really offer anything to the level of Davis and even a first. And that's a really small return, everyone's thinking, right? The Nuggets offer would have been even worse. Porter and a first, basically, and maybe Strother and Brown or something. I don't know. Because you can't trade Murray or AD. But maybe you live in the world where Jamal doesn't sign the contract and he's eligible to be traded. Jamal, Porter, a first, a bad contract coming back, and Christian Brown going there. I still don't think that's getting you Luka Doncic because the Mavs GM wanted Anthony Davis so bad. He has explicitly said, we want a championship level defense. Now, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are not contributing to that or being the anchor point of that championship level defense. Now, they can be players and be fine and not hurt your championship level defense. Neither guy is a horrible defender. They're both fine, but neither is an all defensive level team player, as we know. Maybe Aaron Gordon, but there's not really a scenario in where the Nuggets had what the Mavs wanted. Even if you had everyone on the table, even if you had all your first round picks, I don't know that there's a deal the Nuggets could have made because they didn't have a player that was what the Mavs wanted. The Mavs made the phone call. So all of it's frustrating, right? Because, everyone wants to see Luka and Jokic play together. They're friends. They play such a great style of basketball. I think we all envision of what that could look like together. It's exciting. On the flip side, the Denver Nuggets killed the Los Angeles Lakers. It was Jover. So Jover. And now they're so back. 2 years in a row in the playoffs, including a conference championship, winning 8 of 9 games against them. You basically end the AD LeBron era. You get the coach fired last year, Darvin Ham. And LeBron's going to ride off into the sunset now. It's over. Jokic took the reins of the NBA from him. Not so fast. You have one of the two players, for my mind, that are capable of being as good as Jokic, at least right now, and Wemby's going to get there in a year or two. Now, on the league's most important franchise, in the second biggest media market in the United States. And those players to me are Luka and Giannis. Changes everything. Luka's instantly the face of the league once LeBron leaves. Not a question. Might be the face of the league now even. Those 77 LA jerseys are going to be flying off the shelves, man. The last time the Lakers had a star that looked like that was Jerry West. Literally the logo on the league. Played like that too. Changes everything. I'd set the over-under at 2.5 titles right now. The Lakers did it again. How frustrating it is if you're a Denver Nuggets fan. You've gotten one of these guys, and goddamn do we love Jokic, right? We love this guy. We love this guy in Denver. Rightfully so. You go back in the Lakers' history when they moved to Minneapolis, from Minneapolis to Los Angeles. I'm going back to George Mikan, one of the best players in the history of the league, to Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, on through to Will Chamberlain, Kareem, Magic. Little gap. It's okay. We've got Shaq now. Kobe. Little gap. LeBron. Luka. By the end of this thing, Jordan and Jokic might be the two best players that have never played for the Lakers. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's some true Yankees stuff. Like, it's unfathomable how they continue to get away with this. And they're going to, they have a couple assets. The fact that they got away with this trade and they still kept their first round pick so they can maybe get a center this year is interesting. I don't think they're a real contender this year. They've got to do some serious shifting. But he's 25. They could do nothing for 2 years, sign him to the extension, accumulate some assets. There's free agents that are going to want to sign there simply because of Los Angeles. And this is how the Lakers get back. The war for Los Angeles. The Clippers just built the best stadium in the history of sports. Lakers go, oh, cool. We got a guy who might end up as a top 5 player of all time. It's incredible. And obviously there's just a level of shock and disgust with this whole thing. I feel so bad for Mavs fans. This would be akin to the Nuggets trading Jokic after the bubble for like James Harden. It just doesn't feel right. And even if the Mavs win a title this year or next year with this team, there's like a mercenary aspect to it, right? Like, I can tell you as a person who covers CUs a lot, and obviously I have affiliations at the university, the 2016 team to me means a lot more than the one we just saw on the field. I'll always be tighter with Chidobe Awuzie than I feel about Travis Hunter. And obviously Hunter's a way better player. But there was something about that magic and watching them struggle and build up together. And I think that's part of the reason that that Nuggets championship and even going back to the Broncos with Elway are so special here, right? They were our guys. They bled. They sweated. They cried for us. And then we saw them achieve. Now, the Lakers is one category of, just bringing a pack of all-stars, and that they're kind of used to it. But Dallas lost arguably the greatest player in franchise history. Talent-wise, Dirk obviously greatest, right? And the guy that's in the top 3 of talent-wise in franchise history is also a guy they traded at 25 that got a lot of triple-doubles, who's the coach of the team now, Jason Kidd. And there's some rumblings that he was involved in this deal. And if you look back at his time in Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo, it kind of makes sense. But there's just so many different angles on it. And I go back to why. Like, why do you do this deal if you're the Mavs? Simply none of the explanations I've heard have made any sense. And it's to the point where you get around the fishy territory and you start sniffing. And I've certainly used my reporting skills to try and find out some things, talking about sports betting and the Texas state legislator and, the ownership change that happened last year between the Cubans and the Adelsteins and right-wing political funds and European basketball expansion. Like, it's all far out there and wacky, right? Like, it really is. But when you have a trade of this magnitude, this level of shock, this level of surprise, involving one of the biggest power players at Nike turned to GM in Nico Harrison, one of his former clients, Kyrie Irving, who sells more shoes than a lot of people in the history of the league have, another one of his former clients, Anthony Davis, the clutch stuff, where LeBron is obviously tied to Rich Paul, and Rich Paul's the agent for Anthony Davis. JJ Redick's a former teammate of Luka Doncic. I mean, it's all incestuous, right? And it's all really fishy. And you look at this trade compared to how the last Lakers star trades have gone down. Chris Paul, obviously vetoed by the NBA. People will say David Stern stepped in. Well, David Stern, the NBA owned the Pelicans at the time, or the Hornets, New Orleans Hornets at the time. So a little bit different. Then that trade happens again with the Pelicans and the Lakers, and it doesn't get done at the deadline. It gets done the year after, and it tanks the Lakers because so many people were involved and the word got out and they couldn't deal with the stress of the trade. I'm someone who earnestly believes LeBron was in the dark on this. I think this was the Lakers getting out of LeBron running their franchise. In the same regard, it's funny because this is the move that might put LeBron back in the world to get a championship. He has looked far lesser this year than he did even last year. The age thing is finally starting to catch up with him. But, and everyone thought this was going to be LeBron at age 38 or 37, if he's even just Paul Millsap, the early days on the Nuggets, that's still a valuable NBA player. So even if he's 17, 6, and 4 a night over 28 to 32 minutes as Luka Doncic's third best option, that's a championship winning player. So this might extend the odometer on LeBron in a way that lets him capture another championship, which changes the math on all of the greatest player of all time conversations, right? Again, it's not happening this year. The Lakers just have too many problems. They need to find a center, limited assets. They just rebuilt their guard rotation by getting rid of D'Lo, and Dorian Finney-Smith looks good there. But I thought the Lakers were done for the rest of the Jokic era. The Nuggets killed the Blazers. Nuggets killed the Jazz. Nuggets killed the Suns. None of them have come back. None of them have even come close. All of them look like they're in horrific states. I mean, the Warriors are still being killed very slowly, but every team the Nuggets have run into, they've conquered and killed. Wolves are still on the way up. I'll give them that. The Lakers are one of those teams. They had no hope, no future, and they escaped it with the lifeline of one of the most idiotic trades I've ever seen from the Dallas Mavericks perspective. You just do not trade that guy under any circumstances. You find a way to make it work. And you know what? Maybe it's just the biggest bet ever that we weren't going to pay this guy the supermax under the new CBA that's really restrictive because we feel like he's going to be the next Joel Embiid. But Joel Embiid's 30, 31. Luka's 25. He has an entire contract before he's Joel Embiid's age. He won't be Anthony Davis's current age until the 2030s. I'm not the biggest Davis fan. He's a great player. Probably right now not talking about age, contract, all that stuff, but just talent-wise and level of play, somewhere between the 7th and 11th best player in the league right now. Obviously, Luka has not been that because he's not been healthy. So the Mavs, again, I think got better. But if you're on the Dallas Mavericks, I mean, their fan base just quit their team. Are you one of the players that's going to be like, oh, yeah, we just traded our star player? I'm feeling good about where we're at going into the deadline. I don't know how you can have a positive reaction to that and still find a way to compete for a title. Not in my book. So, and historically speaking, by the way, and I did a lot of this research when the Suns traded for Kevin Durant. When an NBA team trades for an all-star player, very rarely do they become a threat within that given season. It takes time to gel. So even if this was a perfect trade for either side, realistically, it's not going to pan out. And both sides gave up an all-star talent and gained one. It's the first NBA trade ever where both teams gave up a previous year's first team All-NBA player. It's incredible. It's just a stunning trade. It blew up my entire weekend. I've been listening to sports talk radio nonstop since. So maybe that's why I sound like a crazed person today. But that's kind of where I'm at from the Nuggets perspective on the Luka Doncic trade. Which is funny that I'm talking about these two teams when I'm like, you know what? I think Dallas, it obviously shortens their window. It might be better this year. Really tough matchup for the Nuggets. Really tough. They've got so much size. And the wings are going to bother the Nuggets. The Lakers become an easier matchup now in the short term, but long term, they're a real threat. But there was a second trade that happened this weekend that had far bigger Nuggets implications. And that was De'Aaron Fox going to the San Antonio Spurs for not much given up. They were able to keep almost all their young talent besides Trey Jones, who's honestly just a backup point guard. I'm a fan of his, though. One of my favorite players in the league, bench players. But you keep Castle. You keep Sohan. You got those guys with Wemby. And De'Aaron Fox is a guy who's been to an all-star game, still pretty young. I think we're going to see a completely different version of him on this team because he's never had a team that was this uniquely geared to play with him. The West right now is kind of a crapshoot from really under the Nuggets at 5 all the way down to 12. I think there's like 4 games that separate everyone. Spurs are one of those teams, but they got to make some jumps and leaps to get into the play-in conversation. I like their odds. A lot of things got to go right. Pop still isn't back from his health concerns. But long term, Wemby needed a guard. And I really had feared it was going to be Darius Garland this offseason because I'm such a big Garland fan, and I think they would have worked perfectly together. But De'Aaron Fox is not a bad second option. And they still have the assets and the money to go out and get a star player in between those two guys. Because I think by the time they are truly in the championship contention tier, which is probably not going to be next year, but maybe the year after, I think Fox is going to be the third best player on that team, which is insane to think about in the current CBA. Not many teams are going to have guys 1 through 3 that are that good, if any. And, there's some thought to why would you speed up the timeline? We're seeing what's happening in Minnesota, and you normally don't speed up the timeline in the NBA, right? It can have some really bad consequences. Put pressure on your young star. Maybe it stunts their development or stunts the other guy's development. Maybe they want to ask out earlier. I think with the new collective bargaining agreements restrictions, having a rookie player as good and generational as Victor Wembanyama, as uniquely ready as Victor Wembanyama, you'd be foolish to not try to take advantage of it in the same way NFL teams do with the rookie quarterback contract scale in comparison to, just the average quarterback. It's why Bo Nix is so much more valuable than Kirk Cousins. It's because he makes so less money comparatively. Likewise, Wemby's making $12 million a year, and he's not that much worse than Nikola Jokic, who's making 60. There is a gap. There is a gap between the two, but you get my point. He's not a Jamal Murray and a Michael Porter Jr. better than Jokic or worse than Jokic. Not already, which is crazy to think about. It's a lot of production from both of those guys. And from the Kings' perspective, who are still right in the playoff picture, I mean, they've been great since the Christie move to make him the head coach. LaVine has been really good for the Bulls this year and has done a lot of what Fox does. And the numbers kind of indicate that they're very similar players. Obviously, LaVine's a little bit older. But when you are the Sacramento Kings and your star player says, I'm going here and I'm only going here, and you're left with no option, to get 3 first-round picks and Zach LaVine, who's an all-star caliber player, back is an amazing return. I mean, heck, the Kings got more for Fox than the Mavs got for Luka Doncic. And shout out our guy Arstis Castanovas in Chicago, who absolutely blew this one. No idea what they're doing. Classic Jerry Reinsdorf team. I've got a White Sox logo back here somewhere in the backdrop. Brutal. So, yeah, while you can make a bunch of jokes about DeRozan and LaVine teaming up and it being 3 years later, and obviously that didn't work, or you can make the joke of they got rid of Halliburton for Fox and then they moved Fox as well. I mean, there's a lot of things with the Kings that are kind of just like this team, right? And I don't think the Kings are going to be like a serious team or a serious threat. Like they are screaming play-in loss or first-round loss. But I do think they did well in the trade considering the circumstances. It's just unfortunate because you look at the way, and Houston lost that game last night because they don't have a closer against New York. But you look at the way Houston's building. You see what Oklahoma City's already doing. And the Spurs get an all-star to go with Wemby. And now all of a sudden Luka's on the richest franchise in the West. I'm the most like, everyone's all, the West got better. Everyone gets better. The Nuggets didn't get better. Why didn't the Nuggets get better? I always hate that take, especially this year. I said going this year, the West did not get better. Look at the West. It did not get better. But you're seeing how these teams are setting up for the future. And I think there's some legitimate things to be scared about if you're a Nuggets fan and wondering if you missed the window. I do think they're just like a tick off this year, the Nuggets. Like, I don't think it's as far as people are making it out to be, but I do think there are some real serious problems that show up in games like over the weekend where, they're playing the Philadelphia 76ers JV squad, maybe their sophomore squad, and Gershon Yabusele almost single-handedly beats the Nuggets. That's a problem. Go to Charlotte, and the Nuggets got nothing for the Hornets. That's a problem. Almost blow a lead to the Pelicans of like 20 points because Trey Murphy can't miss. That's a problem. So it's not even like a mentality stuff. Like, there was some stuff mentality-wise last year that were issues for sure in repeating for a title. It's got to be so hard on a person's brain to try and get that to the mountaintop again after you've reached it and that's been your goal your whole life. And now you're like, oh, let's run it back. Do it twice in 12 months. So I do think there's some of that still, like not as much. I just, again, come back to the actual roster is the problem. And now you're looking at it. And over the weekend, you lose Russell Westbrook for an indefinite amount of time. Timetable's unclear. And Peyton Watson for at least a month. And all of a sudden, when Dario Saric is giving you nothing, Vlatko Čančar's already out for a significant amount of time. Deron Holmes is already out for the year. And the Nuggets finally figured out their backup point guard thing with having Russ here, and he's obviously worked his way into the starting lineup. The Nuggets are down to Christian Brown playing some point guard again, like last year, and Zeke Naji starting because Aaron Gordon had to take a little rest off because he's still coming back from that calf injury. So the Nuggets here in February have 12 games. Only one of them is against the top 4 team in either conference, which is the Pacers. So whatever. They don't play anyone serious until the Thunder on March 9th and 10th. And then they've got like the Spurs, they've got a real serious schedule after that. I am interested. There is a game in February against the Lakers, but again, it's going to be like 3 games into the Luka thing. It's not going to be really that telling. It's just going to be fun to see Luka, LeBron, and Jokic all on the floor together more than it's going to be telling. But I think the Nuggets have some serious depth issues now. And part of it's bad luck. Like the Deron Holmes thing is just bad luck. Peyton Watson thing is just bad luck with him getting hurt. Some of it's self-inflicted with using your biggest offseason asset on Deron Holmes and trading way too many second-round picks to dump off Reggie Jackson, who's still playing at an NBA level. I don't understand that one for the life of me. Because you're really boxed in. So there's some bad luck. There's some poor decision-making. And then there's some, poor decision-making on giving Zeke a contract, but just poor skill stuff, right? With Zeke not turning into what you maybe had hoped. So it's a combination of things that are kind of just working against the Nuggets and ultimately puts more stress on the reigning Western Conference Player of the Month, Nikola Jokic, and 3-time NBA MVP. And what I thought was really great was Michael Porter Jr. steps up for, I think, his third highest scoring performance of his career last night. After the game, Michael Malone comes out, vehemently supports him. We're not trading this guy. Was never a question in my book, as we've talked about on this podcast here on Denver Sports YouTube channel. But nonetheless, really telling about where the Nuggets are at and how they feel about MPJ and where they are with the core four right now. And MPJ has no doubt been their second best player this year. Some might say it's been Russ. It's not. It's been MPJ. He's had a couple off nights here and there, but more or less been pretty consistent and hits the glass and does things that no other player in the league really does besides like the top tier of the top tier all-stars. And I'm talking about like Wemby, Durant, LeBron in terms of his defensive and offensive contributions while shooting as many threes. And I love the fact that he shot over 10 threes last night. I think he could have shot 2 or 3 more watching that game. He passed up some open looks. I'm not the NBA shooter, so I'm not the best at this, but point being, that is one way the Nuggets can solve some of their 3-point deficiencies, is just simply trying to force Michael Porter Jr. to shoot more shots. And of course, the efficiency is going to go down because everyone knows he's the real only shooter on the court. But right now, when you have Zeke Naji playing starter minutes and Christian Brown and Julian Strother and a little bit of Jalen Pickett are handling backup guard duty, I think you got to try some things and just send it, like you just got to send it like that. I would say it in a different way if I wasn't on a podcast, if you understand what I'm trying to get to. Okay. So with those injuries, do the Nuggets change what they do at the deadline? And I think the answer is yes, because I think they need a forward to get them through the next month. There are definitely people, and I understand why they think this, that believe the Nuggets need a backup center. I'm at the point where I think they don't, because I think Aaron Gordon's going to do it, not only in the playoffs, but just through the regular season. He's a little bit slower this year with the calf injury. Peyton's done such a good job at the 4. MPJ has been awesome at the 4. That's where his best offense comes from. So I almost think that you need a 3-4 instead of a 4-5. And you look at your future assets, Deron Holmes projects as a 4-5. Zeke's already a 4-5. Vlatko's kind of a 3-4-5. I think the Nuggets are a little bit weaker at the 3-4 spot than they are at the 4-5 spot right now. And especially when you have the injuries to Peyton and Russ obviously a point guard, but does a lot of things a forward does in terms of play style. I think it would behoove the Nuggets to target one of those guys at the deadline within the next, 36 hours here. I don't think they make a serious, shocking move that changes everything. I doubt they even get rid of a guy like Julian or Peyton or Christian or something like that. I'm literally just talking about adding a body at this point. And, if they added one body here, and let's say it's a Jayshawn Tate, who I'm a real big fan of the way he plays in Houston, and he closed a little bit last night with the Rockets. And then you hit the buyout market with, Justin Holiday. I think that's a giant win for where the Nuggets are right now. But Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson are both playing as of last night, and both those guys are guys I just suggested getting cut. How are you getting off the Dario contract? I have no clue. You're not getting off the Zeke contract, despite the Nuggets showcasing him the last 2 games. Little too late, fellas. Little too late on that one. Might not have wanted to tank his value all year before doing that. He's averaging 1 point a game coming into last night. So we will talk to you again in a couple hours. I've got some thoughts on the Comcast altitude deal from the Nuggets perspective. You can catch all of that bonus episode on Denver Sports YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, follow, comment, do all those things. Thanks for sticking with me for this extra long podcast. And I will also be back on Thursday for our post NBA trade deadline podcast, where I will explain to you why the Denver Nuggets doing nothing might not mean they're doing nothing. I already know that's exactly what's going to happen. And maybe this clip will go viral because the Nuggets have done something shocking. But that's how I feel right now. Thank you for tuning in. Jake Shapiro, Mile High Hoops podcast. Again, YouTube, like, subscribe, Denver Sports. We are on top of all of it.